black fatigue. It's all over my FYP page. Thank you. I am so happy that this is being brought up. And oh, by the way, for us white people that have been around the block a long time, this isn't new to us. We've been dealing with this for over 40 years.
Black people that carry themselves with a level of dignity and take care of business, they are labeled as the bad guys. You're not going to get any more backlash. And I'm very glad that white people are starting to understand the plight of the rest of us, because we can't go anywhere without somebody saying, me personally, I'll go somewhere and then somebody will say, yeah, I'm glad that you're here. I'm glad you're one of us. And it's like, I'm a regular person just like everybody else. You know what I'm saying? But it always becomes a black thing.
People are tired of dealing with niggas and nigga shit. Black fatigue is a collective tiredness that everyone in the country, especially in the United States, has for black people. People are tired of the ghetto-ness, the ratchetness, the loud behavior, the fighting, the arguing. They're tired of all that shit from black people. They're tired of black people using the race card to escape any kind of criticism or any kind of trouble at all. They're tired of the excuse from black people for why they can't do something is because, well, I'm black, and because of slavery, and because of racism, and because of a bunch of bullshit that does not fucking affect them in reality. So what's the solution? Well, the solution is for black people to acknowledge that they have a problem. Our culture is a problem. The way that we handle ourselves and handle issues is a problem. Black people need to stop acting as if there is nothing wrong with us.
Black fatigue? Well, let me give you whites and coons a little inside information. We don't give a damn about your fake outrage called black fatigue. Just like the word woke and white lives matter, you just try to flip the true definition or meaning to make it all about you.
White people attempting to rebrand white rage by co-opting the term black fatigue as though it's a phenomenon they actually experience but only recently found the language to talk about is both dystopianly weird and tragically on brand. The copying, the whitewashing, the centering themselves by playing victim. But what's ironically telling about it is that the concept of racial battle fatigue is not new. It's been around for decades, and the term black fatigue has been used by black people for quite a while. Mary Frances Winters wrote a book that came out in 2020 titled Black Fatigue, and it describes the mental, emotional, and physical exhaustion that black people experience because of systemic racism. Now, notice how black people didn't call that white fatigue, because the purpose is not to assign blame in order to justify bad behavior. It is called black fatigue because it is a harm that black people experience, and so their focus is on addressing and combating that harm. Whereas when white people talk about experiencing black fatigue, they are not talking about a harm that they experience because of black people or anybody else. They are literally telling on their own inability to live in society with black people. And that's not new either. That's a pathology that has existed for hundreds of years, but call it what it is, white rage.
Because you're the most emotional group of men on this planet. So emotional that you feel a warm and fuzzy feeling inside when your black pets with their flea collars validate your white nationalist talking points. But I'm going to lean into the black fatigue for a few minutes. We don't care about your lame black fatigue because our black fatigue has been over 400 years of oppression and heartache from you in America and across the globe. As a side note, you people don't even have the strength or the stomach to face what we have, let alone overcome what you have done to us.
Can I just tell every single one of you peckerwoods that are out here talking about this new fucking word, black fatigue, that we don't give a fuck. We've been having white fatigue and anti-whiteness and anti-blackness being pushed in front of our faces for the last 400 years. We don't give a fuck about you, how you feel. We don't give a fuck. You're lying. You are nothing but victimhood white people. You people suck asshole straight through fucking straws. That's what you do. You are the worst people in the history of ever existing of anything. You have no purpose in this world except for to bring harm and then spew hatred about everyone else but fucking you. You are the most dangerous people. You are the biggest thieves. You are the biggest haters in the world. That is all you fucking do because you can't do nothing but be greasy, stringy-haired mutations of everybody else. You don't have any single thought in your mind that came from you. You steal. That's all you have done. Get your funky ratty-tatty, Rudy-poo ass somewhere else and mind the business that fucking pays you, because all of you cocksucking white women who sitting up here letting them men be all in y'all pussy, and then you get in there and you want to start that Handmaid's Tale march. Bitch, we don't give a fuck about that shit neither. We don't give a fuck about none of that. We don't give a fuck about y'all. We don't give a fuck about y'all little funky ass wet dog smelling children. We don't give a fuck about none of that shit. As a matter of fact, if you would, stop telling your funky ass kids that if you find yourself in danger, find a black man. No, find a peckerwood man, because y'all tired of, you got black fatigue. And all you nigga bitches that's out here talking about black people, y'all done so much harm. Bitch, we haven't done any harm. When you're heavily policed and the only thing that you see on TV is the heavily policed areas of black communities, meanwhile, every goddamn time a white girl go missing, who the fuck took her? Because it ain't one of us.
But I got a story for you. I see you white supremacists and Sambo Negroes calling us thugs, when the white man has been the biggest thug in the history of this planet. Case in point, you happily slaughtered each other for thousands of years. But instead of calling it a gangbang or gangbanging, you call it glory or conquest. Whether it be squabbling warring Greek states or the Romans slaughtering and pillaging Gaul, Germania, the British Isles, well, frankly, anything east or west of the Rhine, whole Celtic tribes and the white people, what is known as the UK today, were decimated, enslaved, raped, and burned to a cinder long before Hadrian's Wall. You people are constantly engaged in white-on-white crime that had totaled tens of millions before your white Jesus even came on the scene 2,000 years ago. And this was during a time when the known world only had about 250 million people. But what about your white king thug Alexander the Great when he attacked, stole, and slaughtered the Persian Empire in Asia Minor? And when he got done killing his own people, he decided to hit modern-day Iraq and instigate a failed attempt to destroy the people of India. He attacked and slaughtered those in Kemet, and just like all you whites normally do, he turned around and stole concepts in regards to technology, philosophy, astronomy, mathematics, and medicine. One of your biggest fears is when the slave becomes proficient at your own tactics and overwhelm you with equal force. This is why you are essentially afraid of competition and see anything as being equal or giving a voice to those who have been harmed by you as oppression. We saw this with Spartacus, and we saw this with Haiti when Haiti kicked the greatest military on the planet's butt in a head-to-head battle for black independence.
Black people that are demanding reparations are stupid. Black people have already been given reparations. Being freed from slavery was reparations. All the civil rights acts that were passed were reparations. Affirmative action is reparations. EBT, all the different grants and all the different programs to assist black schools and black students is reparations. Black people don't want reparations to repair anything. It's about racial revenge. It's about humiliating white people. And
speaking of Haiti, you hate reparations for black people but wanted reparations after a black country won its freedom from you whites. You hate reparations for black people, but then gave reparations to lazy white slave owners. You whites turned around and then spent the better part of 200 years slaughtering men, women, and children and the elderly in your silly crusades initiated by your white Pope Urban II. And we need not to address your white Christian leaders pushing laws like the Edict of Thessalonica or conversion by the edge of the sword. Your murder and wickedness has been spearheaded throughout the centuries. You then went over into the African kingdoms and you took, killed, raped, and pillaged, taking land, water, and other resources from the black people of Africa while shoving your religion down our throats. There are all too many horrors to mention in this video about what you have done and continuously do to the continent of Africa, but the closest words to describe it is horror and incalculable debauchery. Not to mention the unknown millions of human capital classified as African slaves, where you kidnapped us from our land, language, culture, and dignity in order to work us to death for cotton, sugar, tobacco, and other industries. A system where you raped our wives and children, and sometimes the men, often selling off our families, butchering us with castrations and other forms of mutilation, and resisting change in order to maintain an evil form of dominance. All along calling it honorable and just, often in the name of religion. Africa is still in a poor state because of your white colonization and corrupt stranglehold, creating instability, loss, and even self-hatred throughout the black diaspora. We don't give a damn about your black fatigue. You whites and tap-dancing coons will say that blacks sold their own people to make yourselves more comfortable and remove all agency from whites, but race wasn't even a thing until the white man created it. These particular black Africans that you're referring to who sold other Africans were enemies or prisoners of warring tribes, which had been far less slaughtered than the white man slaying his own people. Yet we never hear any mention of Julius Caesar slaying or enslaving his own people in Gaul and Britain. You people didn't go far enough, so you decide to do more. You people then do a hostile takeover of land, resources, and women of Australia and nearly wiped out the indigenous population there, whom you still treat inhumanely, claiming that land as yours under the pretenses of having a white penal colony for your white thugs. If that wasn't enough, in 1492, you had your dumbass champion Christopher Columbus, who got lost and too stupid to realize that he wasn't even in India and stumbled upon the Americas, claiming he had discovered something that people had already discovered and were already living on. Where you, white people, again stole, raped, slaughtered, and put other people to the edge of the sword or by cannon fire, making them into slaves and again taking women, children, land, and wealth for your own. But worst of all, many of their lives as the Tanio people don't even exist anymore because of the white man. Of course, you'll blame disease and infection to make it sound better, but Columbus, Cortez, and other white colonizers slaughtered with the sword and intentionally used infected blankets on the natives in South America and the Caribbean all the way up through Canada. Columbus was such an unintelligent and lame white DEI hire that after 4 voyages of graping, stealing, and pillaging, he still died broke in obscurity. Yet you brain-dead Neanderthals will celebrate him as someone as hardworking, ethical, or great. Today you want all-white schools and all-white towns, but despite the slaughter and grape of the Americas, you incompetent dummies couldn't survive a couple of winters by yourself in an all-white colonial settlement. But why should we be surprised? Because after all, you've never built or created anything peacefully among yourselves or on your own. You had to bring in black people to help you stop internal stealing and cannibalizing each other from a lack of food and sustenance. But you don't call that form of barbarism white-on-white crime, do ya? This, along with getting assistance from the same natives you took and slaughtered for adventurism, amusement, and booty. But after a few hundred years of native oppression, you had the natives removed from their lands and gave away land in your white land grabs. Many of these white land grabs were sold for pennies on the dollar per acre or free to the white man.
Imagine a race where the prize is free land. On April 22, 1889, thousands of settlers lined up at the borders of the unassigned lands in Oklahoma, waiting for a signal to claim their piece of the American dream. The Great American Land Rush was a chaotic event that saw people on horseback, in wagons, and on foot, all dashing to stake their claim. In just a few hours, over 2 million acres were claimed. This event wasn't just a land grab. It marked a significant moment in American history, shaping the demographics and economy of Oklahoma. The rush for land symbolized hope, opportunity, and the relentless pursuit of prosperity.
On the 22nd of April 1889, the Oklahoma Land Rush took place after 2 million acres of unassigned lands were opened to settlement. The Oklahoma Land Rush came as a result of the government's decision to remove Native American tribes from their ancestral lands and open them up to settlement by non-indigenous settlers. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 and subsequent treaties forced many Native American tribes to cede their lands and relocate to reservations in what is now Oklahoma. The Dawes Act of 1887 aimed to break up tribal land holdings and encourage individual land ownership, leading the government to open up the unassigned lands in the Oklahoma Territory for settlement. The area was considered to have some of the last available land in the West suitable for agriculture and settlement. On April the 22nd, 1889, an estimated 50,000 hopeful settlers gathered along the borders of the Oklahoma Territory. At noon, a gunshot gave the signal for them to chaotically race into the territory on foot, horseback, and in wagons. Here, they staked their claims, and by the end of the day, cities such as Oklahoma City contained more than 10,000 people. Other people, known as Sooners, hid inside the unoccupied land before the legal time of entry, leading to a number of disputes over land boundaries. Nevertheless, by the end of the year, an estimated 62,000 people were living in the unassigned lands, while homes, schools, churches, and businesses were quickly established. However, the Oklahoma land rush had negative consequences for the Native American tribes who had been forcibly removed from their lands to make way for the settlers. Many indigenous people were displaced from their traditional territories and lost access to vital resources, leading to economic hardship and social dislocation.
So stop talking about pulling bootstraps and meritocracy when the white man has been pampered like an infant in America. Yeah, you fought the Civil War, but it wasn't because you hated slavery. After all, one side just wanted to preserve the Union, and the other side just wanted to preserve the wicked institution and brutality of black chattel slavery. But at the same time, you also were too busy attacking Asian nations like Japan, where Commodore Perry brought havoc and mayhem to the Japanese with cannon and superior firepower just in order to force them to trade with you. So much for the free market. But despite hundreds of years of oppressing the natives, black people, and other people around the globe, you still had that multiple millennia old itch to slaughter your own people for fun and emotion. It's in your DNA. You intentionally mistreated the white Irish and put them into separate brigades after you conscripted them into the Civil War. Then you put them into the front lines in order to be cannon fodder for your insatiable bloodlust. You only allowed them to be considered white when you wanted to artificially boost up your population numbers in the United States. You people also did the exact same thing to the Italians and Slavs as well.
Imagine a scientist looking at you, studying your features, and assigning you a score, one that determines whether or not you belong or whether or not you're something less than. In 1885, John Badeau, a leading British anthropologist, did just that. He created something called the Index of Negrescence, literally a scale of blackness. If you were Irish, the science was not on your side. And so when he mapped out his findings, he decided that the Irish, along with the Welsh and the Scots, were ranked as significantly darker than the Anglo-Saxons. In his conclusion, the Irish weren't truly white, and they were a separate lower race than the Anglo-Saxons. They were more primitive, more emotional, and less capable of self-governance, which I think is kind of like a real doozy to throw in there, right? So this wasn't just an academic theory, there were real-world repercussions. This was used to justify discrimination. It shaped how the Irish were viewed in Britain, which is a massive history all on its own, right? And how they were treated in America, which is what we're going to get to. But if you think that sounds extreme, consider what Charles Kingsley, who was a well-respected historian and clergyman, read pastor, wrote after he visited Ireland. He said, quote, "I am haunted by the human chimpanzees I saw there in Ireland. But to see white chimpanzees is dreadful. If they were black, one would not feel it so much." He wasn't alone. British political cartoons, especially Punch magazine, regularly depicted the Irish with ape-like features, framing them as violent, animalistic, inferior, drunkards. So I have a newspapers.com subscription, which is amazing, and you could search your old papers. In just a 2-second search, I was able to come up with a bunch of ads that said in them, like, don't apply if you're Irish. Just straight up don't. The Irish were portrayed in America as dangerous, criminal, lazy, and many Americans questioned whether the Irish were even fit for citizenship. There's a political cartoon I'm thinking of. I don't have it printed out, but I'll put it on the screen. Basically, it's Lady Liberty there. She's stirring this big pot. This is the American melting pot. And you see all these different people kind of being put in there. And they're all blending together, except there's one guy standing in the back that seems kind of out of control. I think he has like his arms up in the air. He's yelling. He's pugnacious. He's not agreeable. He's not folding in. And he's Irish. And I think the caption says something to that effect of like, you know, this is the one group that can't really become Americans. How amazing to hear that talk. You know, when we talk about the Irish now, you wouldn't think of it as, oh, well, these guys can't really become Americans. I mean, they're as American as anyone, right? But that's not how they were perceived when they first came here. And many Irish immigrants distanced themselves from other marginalized groups to try to protect themselves, especially Black Americans. They did begin to align themselves politically with white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. This isn't some obscure footnote in history. It was mainstream science. If you've ever looked at an old 19th century newspaper, you would see racial classification charts. And you might expect to see prejudices at the time against African Americans or Brits with African ancestry, but right next to those, you would see an Irishman. They were drawn with exaggerated, almost ape-like features and labeled as something less than fully human. And this wasn't just racist propaganda. Like I said, it was science with a capital S. And it shaped everything, the jobs that Irish immigrants could get, how they were treated in America, and even the stories that were or weren't passed down in families, including mine. And the fact that this history has been erased is not an accident.
So, if you are of Irish descent or Italian descent, you're not officially white. Oh, by the way, the Polish race, they weren't white. Brits were not white. Hungarians were not white. Slowly, they became white. That whole movement along the line of what is white, it's not fixed at all. Not at all. And what it does is, it provides something, again, that you need to look up. Something called white privilege. The privilege of having a white skin. There's a lot of people saying, I don't believe it. But again, if you've never heard of it, there's a tendency to doubt it, to dispute it, and to say, that's not true. I encourage you, if you heard anything that I said that you doubt, you can ask me about it, or you can do research. Okay, prove it to yourself, not to me.
From the very beginning of the United States, especially after the Gilded Age, the white man has been coddled and handed everything that you've got off the backs of darker-skinned people. For example, after the turn of the 20th century, white men were provided with great military benefits like the GI Bill and provided free education by the government and also other programs. Meanwhile, despite fighting and suffering in every single war in America, the black man and his family were overlooked for such benefits. Such neglect. But despite this neglect, the white man still found to do other thievery in other places. Because in the midst of this, you managed to steal the Hawaiian Islands from Queen Lily and call it annexation to make the criminality and pillaging sound just a little bit nicer. But again, that ugly, dark, deep itch, it just keeps rearing its ugly head to slaughter your own people. In 1914, World War I kicks off. Well, what do they get, Johnny? Well, the white man gets 15 million people into the meat grinder for land, cash, and prizes.
At 7:30 a.m, whistles rang out across Allied lines near the River Somme in northern France. Thousands of men clambered out of their trenches and slowly began to advance towards German lines. But when the barrage lifted, German machine gunners emerged from their intact shelters and mowed down the oncoming British infantry in their thousands. That first day on the Battle of the Somme was the bloodiest day in British military history, with over 57,000 casualties.
The sickening part about this is that number, slightly half of those deaths at least, were civilians, innocents, casualties of war. But fear not, because we can take comfort in knowing that this was supposed to be the war to end all white wars, all violent white wars. But enter World War II, the biggest white-on-white crime ever, where at least 60 million, mostly white men, died for territory, bragging rights, and the fragile egos of the white man. These white men are literally gang members that just happen to have their own colors, their own sets, their own flags. But you don't call these white thugs gangbangers. No. You call them presidents, prime ministers, general secretaries, Deuce and Führer. Again, I just want to revisit the Julius Caesar example about killing his own people, because this is the same nonsense you say about black slavery in regards to African leaders and black people in America. But Hitler did far worse and was doing the same thing to Poland, Czechoslovakia, Belgium, Denmark, Greece, Norway, Yugoslavia seemed like another country. Ah, yes, the Netherlands. France? He rode right through France. I mean, after all, there's selfies of Hitler right in front of the Eiffel Tower. He bombed England back into the Stone Age for the better part of a year, and I can only imagine Stalin's initial shock at the betrayal of his fellow dictator by betraying him in Operation Barbarossa. Hell, Hitler even attacked his own home country of Austria, yet you emotional and disingenuous white colonizers never say anything about how he was exterminating or enslaving his own people. Russia lost over 25 million people in World War II alone. Are you starting to notice a pattern with the death and carnage between these people? Their own people. Then the whites in the West tried to take advantage of Russia losing so much in World War II by using containment and other propaganda, kind of like the McCarthyism thing. One of the things I've also noticed that the West is afraid of certain countries having atomic and nuclear capability when you are the only group of people who have ever dropped a nuke on another country. Twice. But too late, your white brethren in Russia were ready with their own nukes just in case this fellow white man in the West wanted a third chapter to this hideous story. We certainly haven't heard the last of Russia in this story, and just another reason why we don't give a damn about your black fatigue. Let's go and take a little peek over to the so-called Middle East, where the white man engineered a coup in Iran and installed the Shah. In fact, you somehow managed to manufacture or orchestrate nearly 100 coups and so-called regime changes throughout the world. The black man has never done any of this. Many of these plots have been in African and Caribbean nations as well. I mean, look at what you did to countries like Cuba and Haiti. All of the occupations, embargoes, and sanctions, only to call them a failed state when you encourage other nations through your influence not to trade with them. Then you go over to support another weak group of white men, only to be left holding the bag in Vietnam. Vietnam, yeah, that's where you people went meddling in Asian affairs. You people spent nearly a decade carpet bombing this country and chose to do the most bombing on Christmas Day. I guess that's your way to show your appreciation to white Jesus. But with over 20,000 tons of TNT on these people just for your amusement and entertainment. But anyway, after losing over 4 million people total and 58,000 U.S. troops, and despite having a more advanced military, the United States still lost the Vietnam War against a brave but ragtag Viet Cong. So much for white power. Well, for the sake of time, I won't go into much detail about the Black American experience, where we have had to deal with Jim Crow, convict leasing, redlining, school to prison pipeline, an unequal judicial system, cruel experiments, hangings, fire torching our towns and putting them underwater like Lake Lanier, for example, unfair treatment in the military, lynchings, maternal mortality rates, lower funding for our education, having to be twice as good as our white counterparts only to be called a DEI hire. How about forced to whitewash our homes in order to get them properly appraised? Now that's a nice one. It's been estimated that the white man has caused 187 million deaths with his irresponsible and rampant wars around the planet in the 20th century alone. Just by simple math, it would take the so-called black thugs of America 14,385 years just to catch up with the death, thuggery, and carnage of the white man. For example, Russia has lost like 1 million military personnel since 2022 against Ukraine, and that number keeps going up, so it's kind of hard to make a judgment call on that. But even if we just tallied the Napoleon Wars of 6 million, it would still take black people in America 461 years just to catch up with you, the white man. You see, we don't have the bloodthirsty mindset that the white man does. After all, we're the same people who ask our perpetrators for a hug and offer forgiveness and say, can't we all just get along? You people, on the other hand, salivate for death, destruction, theft, and slavery. So much that throughout American towns, you play toy soldiers and regularly do Civil War reenactments just to slightly curb your evil cravings. The black man, well, in fact, no other group of men on earth causes the vile animalistic behaviors and negative outcomes like the white man does.
React app just now to see that the word black fatigue is trending amongst a lot of different people. And before I made this video, I scrolled on it and I said, let me see what people are talking about.
Because black fatigue is real. I think society as a whole is there. We are just so unbelievably fed up with the ghetto ratchet behavior, entitlement, the victimhood, camaraderie, animalistic. This is why people have black fatigue. I'm sick and tired of opening up TikTok and seeing brawls on cruise ships, brawls in the airport, like literally the most ghetto behavior. We're tired.
A white woman was talking about Shiloh Hendricks, the lady that called the 5-year-old the N-word. And she said, that shouldn't have happened, but people have black fatigue. People are tired of ghetto-ness, loudness. People are just tired of black people. So we all have fatigue. And it got me thinking, I've heard the phrase black fatigue before, and I know in my heart of hearts that that relates to the fatigue that black people experience existing in this country and around the world, dealing with racism and prejudices that have been put on us due to the history of violence, Jim Crow, segregation. So how are white people appropriating black fatigue? They replaced DEI with black fatigue. And you guys are using that because you're tired of being held accountable for things that you should be held accountable for in this country, and you want to be openly racist to us. This entire discourse is rooted in racism. You want to be able to say you're tired of black people for having a voice. You're tired of us for existing in spaces we exist in. You're tired of us for not all being poor. You're tired of the fact that some of us are doing better than you, but when we live in a country that is based on racism and systematic racism that still exists today, you can't be mad that we're calling you out for it. What the fuck are we talking about? America is a country that suffers from delusion, lack of education, and basically exists in a consistent state of dementia, because the cognitive dissonance that many white people have that exist in this country it alarms me. The fact that this country was founded and predicated on owning bodies and killing off natives. That is the foundation story of this country, is the heart and soul of this country. It is rooted in racism. The Declaration of Independence was rooted in racism. The Constitution was written with racism. So the fact that you think you can exist, and we're only out of segregation for how many years now? Not even a generation, not even 2 generations out of segregation. The fact that you think you can exist without racism internally inside of you is crazy. Because you guys hear the word racism, you're like, I'm not racist, I have black friends. It doesn't mean you're going out with crosses on fire. There are levels to the internalized racism, the internalized biases versus violent, aggressive racism. But racism is the foundation of America. So the fact that you don't want to hear about it is not my problem. The funniest thing about white people in this country is that the lack of education that they have on their own history and how they've been all sold a lie and socialized to believe that they're here and we're violent and they're not is fucking crazy. You ever seen a redneck? You ever been to a trailer park? You ever seen a meth addict in New Mexico? That all of the people on welfare in this country are white. 96% of them are white. But meanwhile, black people are poor, uneducated, animalistic, violent. All the list goes on. Your ancestors literally killed off millions of people who are on this land, stole it, raped, robbed, killed them, stole us, raped, robbed, killed us, procreated with us, and made us procreate with each other and our families. Yet the list goes on. Upon further review, after seeing 5 or 6 black people make this black fatigue video, it got me thinking into the respectability politics of this type of video they're making, because not only are they generalizing the actions of all black people and lumping us into one group, you are policing the actions of people per the standardized or acceptable behavior that white people are saying that we should have. Interesting. What you're doing by making these videos is you're allowing white people to not take accountability and not hold themselves to a standard that they can just be racist and prejudiced towards us and say that their behaviors are acceptable and their way of life and living is acceptable in this country, but ours isn't. I will never understand black people that pander to white people. I will never. There's nothing in my being that would ever allow me to have an internal conversation externally on this app, so white people feel comfortable saying how they feel about us in the open and make it a whole thing. Imagine you are allowing white persons to say they have black fatigue. They're tired of black people being victims. They're tired of black people saying racism. They're tired of black people existing.
Allow me to quickly add this in real fast. I think it's really interesting how the black tap dancing coons, the pets for the white supremacists themselves that they're trying to emulate, it's really interesting that these group of people are quick to talk about they are experiencing black fatigue. Well, the thing is, you can't be that fatigued because you actively go online looking for bad things that black people might do while simultaneously overlooking the thousands of things. No. Let me go back on that. All of the millions of things that white people do every day that's bad, and you conveniently overlook them. In short, black people should always embody greatness, wisdom, being civil, and love for each other. To peacefully elevate ourselves, have a sense of pride, and grow as a people. And that often comes with accountability among those who love us and love themselves. But that accountability doesn't come from coons because coons don't love themselves or they're immoral white plantation taskmasters. Again, we don't give a damn about your lame black fatigue. You whites are the biggest hypocrites, and I have history on my side to demonstrate that very statement. You are by far the biggest thugs, the biggest deleters, the biggest enslavers, the biggest child predators, the biggest abusers of illegal drugs and alcohol, the biggest thieves, the biggest rapers of women, the biggest violators of treaties and contracts, the biggest spreader of lies, the biggest polluters of our land and waterways on this planet. Hell, you people can't even keep outer space clean. You have some nerve to utter a word about black fatigue when all you've done is fatigue other groups and brought nothing but death and destruction to every single corner of this planet.
Black fatigue is when I can hear you 10 aisles away in Walmart with your 5 fucking kids. Black fatigue is when you have no home training and you have no idea how to act in public. And a lot of it is culture. I've been in the hood. I've been in the fucking schools and the projects where I was the only white girl there.
When the weakest group of females in existence proudly expose themselves but aren't smart enough to realize it, because imagine ending up living in the projects next to the very people that you look down on, even though you benefit more than anyone else from DEI, food stamps, and affirmative action. You have an entire system designed and rigged specifically to support your severe mediocrity and admit that you still failed. That's embarrassing.
When majority of y'all know someone who has been unalived by another black person, way more than any instance of a black person being unjustifiably unalived by the police, that's black fatigue, as well as donating to Carmelo Anthony and Rodney Hinton Jr. When you aren't able to hold your own community accountable, that's a problem.
If we're being completely honest, the single solitary thing they spectacularly excel at is breeding the males who dominate every most wanted list in America. Rapists, mass shooters, PDF files, and being the very obedient doormats for these monsters they breed. God bless America. Meanwhile, black women are outpacing the superior males academically and entrepreneurially and doing it with fewer resources and none of the privilege.
And I can 100% guarantee you that it's culture.
Can you define anything about your culture outside of the extensive history of violence, control, and theft? I'll wait. I'd like to give some honorable mention of your consistent achievements, which include weaponizing your tears to end people's lives and bullying 5-year-olds and calling it patriotism. So accomplished.